then I'll work out really well. But if I don't, I never have time by the time I get home.
Do you get so full during the day that you just don't have time?
I can't breathe. Especially in this season of my life, but family's just such an important factor to me. When I get home, it's not. There's a lot of people that'll go out and smoke a cigar after work or do that, and all those fine. But when I'm done, 5, 6 o'clock at night, and the kids go to bed early at their age, 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock?
Yeah.
How old are they?
I got a 4-year-old and 8-year-old. But we've always kind of scheduled them. So if they go to bed at 8, they're up at 6:30 with the rest of us. And that schedule stays on. Now on vacations, weekends, that's not great when they're waking you up at 6:30. But so the point is, when I get home, what we want to do is spend that time with the kids. Cherish that now, because they'll be gone.
When you say the seasons, do you think that there's seasons of a person's life?
I absolutely think so. I think that's probably the natural flow. I took Psychology 200, and so there are those phases in a person's life.
Seasons?
Seasons is probably an easy way to describe it. But right now it's a busy season. It's a good season, but it's a busy season.
Have you ever heard that Van Morrison's? No, not Van Morrison. Frank Sinatra. That song that says, "When I was 17."
Yeah.
He goes through the phases, and do you realize that we are now older than the phases he sung in that song?
Really?
Which is very depressing.
Yeah.
I guess we were his age, because he couldn't sing when I was 80 or 70, because he wasn't yet.
Yeah. How old do you think I am? Let's test
Well,
it.
you were in the, were you in the Afghan war? Or
I was.
Afghanistan?
I was. I got there about 2002. I think we actually landed September 11th, 2002, so 1 year after.
What branch were you in?
I was with the Army. We were with the Special Forces group that was over there, the 20th SF group. And so we deployed into Uzbekistan, and there was a base there, and then our team deployed out of that into country. And we were there 9 months or so.
Was there? Did you see any combat?
It was, yeah. I mean, it's what you were there for, and that was really early on in the war. Iraq or Afghanistan was it was an interesting war for our group, for the people that I worked with, the Green Beret group, because it really was that kind of traditional hearts and minds war. You go in and you meet a warlord, you meet an old leader, you support him, you train his troops, and you help him fight their own battle. And that's what Afghanistan was all about. Different from, say, a war in Iraq, which was much more traditional and conventional. So the early stages of that war were neat for somebody that's that hairy-chested freedom fighter wanting to go at it.
That was said to be the longest war.
Probably so. On record, because I think they actually went to Congress and did what they did.
Were you were in the Green Beret? Mm-hmm. Is that what that is? Isn't that like pretty far up?
Yeah, I think each branch of the military has their own special operations element. So the Navy has the SEALs, and the Air Force has the pararescue, and there's other groups within there.
The Marines?
Marines got long-range recon, and this is just a few of those groups. I mean, there's a lot that fall under the umbrella of special operations.
Green Beret came about. It got its notoriety, I guess, from Rambo, right? Wasn't he a Green
Came
Beret?
First, the chicken or the egg? But I think it really picked up. John Wayne was probably one of the original ones to have a movie out about the Green Berets. Of course, that was the Vietnam War, and he'd run around with his M16 carried upside down and was just in the traditional John Wayne character. It was neat, and so
why did he carry that upside down?
I don't know. Why did John Wayne do half of what he did?
Remember in True Grit when he put the reins in his teeth and he was shooting with a rifle and a pistol? No, 2 rifles at the same time.
Right.
and cocking them as he shot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was so there was that, and you know the late 40s, 50s, and then probably in the early 60s is when the Green Berets truly became a legitimized element under the military, under the Army. There was a lot of back and forth at that time of whether they should just be part of airborne or whether they should be their own element. And John F. Kennedy had a real affinity for the Special Forces and for the Green Beret group, and so he gave them a lot more legitimacy as their own element during that time.
Did you choose to go in that branch, or was it like they chose you, or how was that work?
I didn't do so well in high school. There's a shocker. I did enough to get by, and so when I got out, my dad really, gave the ultimatum to me. You're going to start. You go to the military, and I will help you walk down a road that I think would be good for you, or go out and get a job. But we're not going to continue to do these things. And so at 18, I joined the military. My dad was a Green Beret in Vietnam, and so he had a few connections, a few people he was able to speak with, and we were able to they were giving out contracts at that point where as long as you completed your course at an appropriate level, you had in your contract all the way through the completion of the Special Forces qualification course, and then you could be part of that team. What traditionally happens is you go into the military as infantry or whatever, and after your first tour, you then can apply to go to the Special Forces selection course and so on. And so for me, I was very young, and probably the youngest guy to complete the Special Forces selection course, at least in my class, because I did that at 19. And then you start the Q course itself. But it was written in a contract, so I just had to, do the infantry and do the airborne and a couple other courses, selection course, about a 2-year process.
Was the training more as far as physical, or was it just your normal basic training?
I think one of the toughest things in the military is not knowing what you're about to do. And so when you're going through basic training, you're thinking, this is the toughest thing in my life. And then you get into airborne school and you think, all right, this is scary. You just don't know what to expect. So once you get into Special Forces and all of the Special Operations Group, the training there is on a whole other level. Physically, it's very physically demanding, but psychologically it's difficult too. And that's one of the things that I remember about the Q course is they really wouldn't give you any feedback. You didn't have somebody yelling at you on a day-to-day basis. The cadre would walk around with just a notebook, and you were given a task to do, or a project or a puzzle of sorts to complete as part of your grading with your element of students. And the instructors would just walk around with their pad. And you're over here, you don't have name tags, you don't have any insignia of rank, you're just there as a number. And you've got your little sewn on number. And you're constantly paranoid that they just wrote my number down. I'm going to get booted out. And so we started with 300, 400 students, give or take. Most of those quit in the 3-week selection process. And then twice during that at the middle, and then at the last day, the cadre would call out a section of people and move them off to the side because they didn't pass the muster that they wanted, and then whoever was left, at least completed that selection course, and then you go on to actually learn your skill set. But it was the mind game. For instance, they would tell you to go down this path and start on a run and jog the whole way, and we'll tell you when to stop. Now we knew that there was going to be a 3-mile run, and somewhere during that you do a 10-mile run, and so we knew that there was different runs that you had to do, or marches with weighted backpacks, but you didn't know which one you were doing that day. And so you just take off and run at a pace. And
is it a fast pace or just a?
I think that's where you have to make your own judgment call. Because if you run at a 3-mile pace and it ends up being the 10-mile run, or you march at the 5-mile pace and it ends up being the 24-mile march, you're going to be hurt.
Does the group set the pace, or
You just run on your own. Everything's really done mostly individually at that point. I mean, everyone's going in the same direction.
so if you
But
went
it's not
real
March.
slow, then
Yeah.
you're going to get booted out.
Yeah.
So you just keep a good pace.
You just find your pace and you do your pace. Yeah. It was interesting.
What is the psychological? Is that what? Do you think that the mind can really take you further than your body knows it can?
I think the opposite's true. I think your body is capable of doing more than what your mind lets it do at times. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that we will stop and my son today, I was riding bicycles with him and he had a little anxiety about falling over and scratching his knee,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, that's just fear building up with you. I mean, you can ride that bike, you can go really fast, you can do well, but in a very simplistic way, he's preventing himself from doing that. So I think the mind sometimes will hold us back from what the body can do.
They say that pain is what holds you back. Pain is what your mind's telling you to stop.
Yeah,
It's giving you the pain so you will stop.
I think that's fair.
But he could fall over and hurt his knee.
And then next time he'll either learn from it or he'll be tougher from it. I mean, it is, there becomes that balance. We can't go through life in a bubble.
But now, you said you were in the airborne. Did you jump out of planes?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the first time you do that has to be the scariest thing you've ever done. The first time.
So here's the irony. I've got a little fear of heights. I've done the rappelling. It was all part of it, but you just block that section from you. But if you'll see me get up near a cliff, or you'll see me over the rappelling ledge, I'll kind of sneak up. I keep a healthy distance away from that edge until I know I'm strapped in and ready to go. So when you get into the airborne, and the instructors at the airborne do a great job of just rote memorization. I mean, they just drill it in your head. You hear this command, you almost, it's like the Pavlov dog. Okay, when that happens, you're gonna respond. And so, when you go out, I mean, your mind ultimately just turns off, and you just move. You just follow the guy in front of you. And it's not until that canopy fills up and you're there that you're like, oh, that's not too bad. So you try not to think of all the things that could go wrong. And when you're dropping during airborne school, I'm a practical guy. I look at this and say, all right, well, they're dropping. My class probably had 500 people in the airborne class, just guessing now. This was 25, 28 years ago. A lot of people. And there were 8, 10 classes going all the time. And you're in airborne school for 3 weeks. Well, there wasn't one injury of a parachute being bound up and you dropping to your death. I mean, during that whole time, that didn't happen. So I'm thinking, all right, statistically, I'm in good shape.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of roll with it. I mean, those things happen, but
So you can combat fear with reason. What are the odds?
maybe. I guess so. That for me.
Because your son falling on the bicycle, he's got a legitimate fear.
Mm-hmm. Or getting on a plane with my wife. She gets a little anxiety when we get on the plane and fly. I've got my hand on here, and I'm thinking, all right, well, how many planes are in the air? I mean, it's very, very rare that those things really happen. So,
Did the military teach you that way to look at stuff and logically, or is that just the way you've been?
you probably have to get my dad in here on the couch for that
Did
one.
he teach you that?
I don't know if he taught me or if it was just something I picked up from him.
He's regimented, isn't he?
He is. He's. I don't know if it's him and I probably don't carry a lot of emotion on our sleeve. We don't jump too much, and I don't. It's hard to say. Is that the military? Is that something going in the other way?
Yeah.
Is that a benefit? Is it a crutch? Sometimes my wife would like me to be more emotional, but
I'm not emotional.
I kinda
Never have
there.
been.
Yeah, yeah. So it's fun though. Military's been good. I think it really changed my life from where it was, leaving high school to, got me out of the house, got me away from mom and in that sheltered area. I had a budget. I had an income. I came in, and if that ran out at the end of the month, I was eating in the, in the mess hall. And you learn to put a little bit of money away so that you could, have that birthday
Yeah.
party when the 2-week paycheck ran
Yeah.
out. And it was good for me to do that. And so then coming back and going to Cleveland State and then Lee University, I felt a little different than some of the students that were already there.
You think it's a level of maturity or a level of I can handle hard things?
Probably a little of both. I don't think of it as hard things. I just think of it as things that need to be done. And so when I went to school, I'm thinking, all right, well, this is what it's going to cost. I'm watching other students, start their semester, get a scholarship, not do so well in their grades, pull out, and then get another Pell Grant or something next semester, and I didn't qualify for those, and so it's, Matt, this is all coming out of your pocket. Get it done quick. And so that's what I did. It was good times.
You studied biology?
I did. I've always kind of followed, I guess, in Dad's footsteps, and so he's a surgeon, and so I always thought from a young kid that I would want to go to med school and be a doctor. And my dad kind of helped that when we were really young. He took us out on the mission field, and I remember at 8 years old, we were in Africa, and he would bring me into the operating room and did a cesarean section and allowed us, Josh or I, my older brother, to hold this baby when he pulled him out, and you had these moments that are like, all right, it's impactful. Not only you're helping this person, but you see the miracles of life and what God's done for us, and you just it's held a special place in my heart. So, growing up, that's always what I wanted to do, and so I went to undergraduate at Lee with that expectation. And of course, it was during that time that I deployed to Afghanistan and started to have some different life experiences.
Did they deployed you? In other words, they said, "It's time for you to go."
Well, yeah, that's probably a fair way to say, but it wasn't like it was a negative thing.
But I mean, they said it's time for you to go.
Look, when 9/11 happened, I was in Psych 200 at Lee University, and I remember them coming up and breaking up the class in the middle and making the announcement that this was going on. I know for myself and every one of my teammates and everybody else that's watching this, our first call when we got out of there was back to our team captain. When can we go? I mean, how soon can we get there? I mean, we're chomping at the bit to get involved in this. And so, that started at our level all the way up through the command structure.
Did you take that personal?
I don't know about personal, but it was hard to see. I did not have anybody in New York at the time. One of my teammates' sisters lived in New York, about 5 blocks from the World Trade Center, and he had already gotten out of the military by that time. He was about 10 years older than us, and so he got back in when that happened and deployed with us over in Afghanistan. And he was a VP with Verizon Wireless, making $250,000 a year, doing really well. So yeah, I think a lot of people did.
So you're sitting in class at Lee College, taking biology. You're going to be a doctor. This happens, and you got to get the backpack back on and go to war.
Well, and I was still a National Guard at that point. Mm-hmm. So I had gone back and forth between active duty and National Guard. And during that schooling period, I was doing your weekend warrior things. So, yeah, I think we finished the semester. We knew when it was coming up. Our team, the 20th group, took over the siege of Soda. We were in charge of the entire war there for a short period of time within the country. And so that gave us an opportunity to get over and get in and spend that 9 months. So, you say deployment, but everyone was begging to go, and we were begging to go, and we were looking for that opportunity. And several of my teammates were able to go 2 or 3 more times. Once I got back, it was, I need to finish school and kind of move in that career route.
Let me tell you about Capstar Bank. They're located in Nashville, Hendersonville, Gallatin, Athens, Madisonville, Sweetwater, Etowah, and in Cleveland at 950 25th Street and 3855 North Ocoee Street. I've used them. I like them. Give them a try. They're no problem. What do you think about that?
I have a... it's tough to say because you have to separate the people like you and I. I mean, we're just over there living our lives. We spent a lot of time with the average Joe, the leather worker, the carpet salesman. Sometimes that's where you would develop intelligence from. We would spend time with them all the way up through the government leaders or the warlord or the governor of our community, which was a large community. But the average Afghan person loved them. Great people. They were not highly educated. They were hard workers. But they wanted the same thing for their family that we want for ours, a better tomorrow, education for their children, both boys and girls, a safe environment to live in. I don't want to say religious freedom, but the ability to worship without persecution. But I think that was a struggle for a lot of them. Reading and writing was not cherished. It was cherished by the people, but it was something that was held over them. The girls were not allowed to be educated, and we've seen the movies, we've seen the scripts, and there's a lot of truth to that. We had a Mujahideen force that lived in our safe house, in our compound. And when we would go out and do missions, basically our team would divide up in half, and half would go out on a mission while the other one stayed at the safe house. They'd be gone 3-4 days, and they'd come back. We would go out, and this was kind of the rotation. And they would take part of the Mujahideen force with them. We had an interpreter that lived with us, and all of that kind of rotated through. But as you talk to them, as a Christian, I might go over there and want to, debate, the biblical backgrounds of each other's books. Mm-hmm. But what you realize is they've never read their own book. They can't read, in many instances. And so where they're receiving their teachings from, their understanding of what the book is from the mullah, the religious leader of that community. They couldn't challenge him. If your pastor came in today and said, God says go, kill this body of people, you'd be like, hold on. What chapter and verse was that? Because that's not the message I received. But there's a little bit more blind faith over there. And so as we would, debate with them or talk with them about various things, we were just living in a home together. A lot of downtime. I began to get this idea that we ought to at least give them something that they can walk away with other than, maybe a free country, maybe an education. And so we asked the interpreter, who we were paying to be there, to spend some time each day teaching them how to read and write. And they didn't have books. And so you'd have them, get them a copy of the Quran in their own dialect and allow them to teach them out of that. It's a book that they can read. There's always a struggle. But the people there were good.
What Bible do they go by? Is that the Gita or the Quran, or?
I believe it is it's the Quran, but under what what dialect or what language that is would be different. So I don't know.
How do we divide that up between their religion and ours? Because they want to be, sounds like they're wanting the same thing we want.
Depends on who you ask.
We've got a picture of you with two of them.
Uh-oh. Okay. So that's winter of 2002, early 2003. And those were two of our Mujahideen forces that were with us. And they would just travel. They would be our security element. Of course, we were 8 guys. Our whole team was about 11 or 12. So when we would go out and do these missions, we would be divided up into, 5-man elements of Americans plus, 8 or 10 Mujahideen that would travel with us.
So did you knew these guys well?
Yeah, they were good. They lived with us the whole time we were there, and lived with them after we left. They rotated over to the next team. Nice folk.
And so their religion is what?
Muslim. That Muslim religion.
They believe in Allah, which is the same thing as God, right?
I don't know if we want to get down because somebody will watch this and scrutinize our teachings, but I think that our two religions, if you go back historically, merge with Abraham and back then. So at some point you had this diversion between the two sects. So
Jacob and Esau, maybe, right?
I think so. So if you can bring them back to that point and say, well, the God at that point that we were all worshiping is the same God that we're worshiping.
That's where they kind of split, I guess.
So. I think so.
But, we asked them, you should believe the Bible, but we don't read their book. They don't read ours. We don't read theirs.
Mm-hmm. I think that's where that problem comes in, is you would discuss these issues with them, and you would get to a point, I believe what I believe, you believe what you believe, and there you go. And it's like, all right, so we'll go to the next
Is that the way they
topic.
did it?
No, it's just the way I'm doing it now. But it was always good to chat with them. They had a desire to learn. They had a desire to even learn the Western culture.
Was there TV over there?
There was satellite TV. We had, probably 2 TVs in our safe house that you could stream the basic channels. What was, your Fox, your CNN, those basic news channels. Didn't have much else.
What did they watch?
I don't know.
I mean, they didn't have sitcoms like we did.
No,
right?
and I don't. The average person probably did not have a TV in their home. They were very protective about their home, and so New Year's Eve, we were invited to. We had 2 dinners to do, and not all of us, but about 3 of us. The first dinner was with the leather worker in town that we just. We liked. We'd come in and say, I've got this bag, I've got this holster that's in American canvas. Mm. Can you make this into a nice leather product? And he would, build it. Mm. There's this picture of horses you said earlier, but we've got, we tried the horses there and that just didn't work for reasons we'll get into. And so we ended up coming up with some motorcycles that we would be able to travel through and do things a little bit differently. And
I emailed that to you.
And so we had these motorcycles. So it's like, all right, well, how am I going to carry my gun? How am I going to carry this? How have I got this? So we would take the motorcycle over to the leather worker, and he would build up a bag for it, like a canvas bag that could strap into the tank and onto the back. And so over time, you just build up a really good relationship with them.
Like saddlebags. Is that what they call them?
High-end saddlebags, yeah. I had a holster on mine and all this other stuff. So it was really cool. Yeah. And when we, so he invited me over for dinner, and we sat down with him and his dad and my team sergeant, and you spent that time, New Year's Eve, just talking and enjoying each other's company, but you were segregated from the rest of the family. They would allow the young boys, the children boys, to come in and say hi, but then the boys were moved out. Never got near the women. The wives were hidden in the back. So you were in this formal room, even for a very low income, relatively speaking, family there. I mean, they were on the low end of the economic scale even for Afghanistan, but you were in a formal room, and it's the only room you went into. So did they have TVs in other sections of the house? Did they have those experiences? Don't know.
Why'd they divide the women out? Was that part of their religion?
Religion or religious teachings, if you can divide the two.
Yeah.
Okay. The Mujahideen did not want that. Of course, that's where the burqa comes in, the facial coverings. We had I can't remember how many months we had been there, but we had developed a very long-term trusting relationship with certain members of our inner circle. And the interpreter we had there had a time where his wife, who was pregnant, was going through a very significant health complication. And he'd taken her to the doctors there. Medicine was different at that level. And they were concerned that she was going to pass. And so after a lot of prayer on both sides, he allowed me to go help and meet his wife. But it was one of these,
Golly.
We're wrapped up. Of course, you see the beard, and we got the head garb on, and you're trying to move through this into his personal home, because if any of his neighbors find out that he's brought an American male, any male, but an American male into his home to meet his wife or to go through it's going to be a bad situation for him. And so it was very risky for him to do that, and you feel honored when you're able to help in that way, but it was trying.
Boy, that is really strange. They were serious about that.
No doubt. I think they would probably, in some cases, allow their wives and children to die rather than, allow them to be seen by another male.
So is that's the saddleback, right?
Yeah, and so, of course, this was, if you were in or around the military in the early, 2000, 2005 time frame, different contractors would come in with different systems. So at that point, they came in with this Molly system that had these canvas straps so that you could take off and attach different items to it. So on this one, I took a set of Molly gear and said, I want you to create a strap for my tank, and then I want you to create that bag on the back, and it all had this Molly system to it, these canvas straps to it. And again, this is very popular even in civilian life now, so on there I could just hook whatever I wanted to hook to it. And so you see a magazine case on there, you probably a radio strap in there somewhere, and probably some grenade holsters, whatever the case may be. You can attach all that and just customize your bike however you like, which takes a little bit of weight off of your body itself.
What about the horses? You got a horse picture, Glenn?
So this is a good example of why horses didn't work very well. I'm 6 foot, and I grew up on horses. But here you've got those Tennessee Walkers and good-sized horses.
Yeah.
These were dang near ponies. And there's another picture taken about this same time with me and a couple of my teammates, and one of them was a 6'7", 250-pound, former linebacker.
Yeah.
That we were going to break that little pony's back.
Look like those old westerns where the cowboys got the little bitty short legs.
Right.
All the.
And so, what we found is it was awfully slow to get from point A to point B, and the motorcycles made it a lot easier for patrolling and movement.
And you didn't have to saddle the horse up, I guess.
And, because the region that we particularly worked in, which was the west region of Afghanistan. You had Turkmenistan, Tashkent north of us, and then Iran was to our west. It was a very large province. So when we would go out on these missions, you might travel 2 days to get to the area where we were told there might be certain intelligence that we wanted to develop or certain people that we needed to meet and work in. And so, I mean, we're not going to saddle these things up and put them in a trailer and drive them that far.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to have a mechanism to be able to get to that final point. And of course, we had vehicles. We had a lot of civilian vehicles that we had used, some up-armored vehicles, some Mercedes, G-Wagon style vehicles, in addition to Humvees and others. So a horse ain't going to make it long. But the motorcycles were pretty easy.
They have regular gas stations like we'd see here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Was it real hot there?
No, it was arid, and the geography was, you would climb 8,000 feet in elevation in a very short period of time. So there would be days I'd be in a t-shirt driving, but by the time 3 hours later I'm bundled up and you're dealing with some snow. Mm. So there was, and the wind was rough. It would get cold. Of course, that sandy ground wouldn't hold heat much. And so there was extremes of extreme cold and extreme heat. But generally it was not unpleasant. Temperature wasn't unpleasant. Honestly, if it was, I say 30 years ago, but that's really shows my age. 50 years ago, before they were really war-ridden as they are now, it's been a beautiful place to go visit. And I think the tourism was decent there.
Pretty safe at that time?
I think at that time, before you started the Russian war.
Didn't the Russians just have to finally leave there? They never did win.
They're a tough people. The Afghan people are tough people. And yeah, I think they just gave up. But they were horrible while they were there. We would drive by churches and mosques, and Americans, I think we respect other people's religions far more than other countries do. We respect the quality of life and the value of life more than other countries do. We would not go shooting up churches in other countries just for the heck of it. Whereas there, they would drive down, swing their tank cannon, say there's a minaret, a tower where they might call to prayer. Let's see if we can hit that. And you would see, round explosions on each one, or at least the remnants of one. Yeah. And this was throughout the country. I don't understand why.
It's about what they're doing in Ukraine right now. Just no point, seems like.
I think that the value of life is less, and it's difficult to deal with. So they tore up the country, and they left behind landmines all over the place. And it was, there were certain areas that teams had gone through and cleared, but you were really taking a lot of risk to get off of that beaten path, back to your horse issue.
Yeah.
And travel 10 feet off a road, 20 feet off a road. You needed to stay in that main path.
There may be a landmine that they didn't clear, as they say in the Army.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Because they would just be scattered all over the place, especially near the border with Iran. It was a lot of those old Russian mines, and it was scary. When we were out there playing one day, you've got that picture of us sitting on the dishkin, and we stayed the night in that border town fort, and we were out playing. There were some kids there, and you try to interact with the local people, and there was one moment in that one of our mujahideen came over and grabbed my teammate, like, stop, and personally escorted him back in because he had known that he'd crossed into that area that had not been, that was well known that it had not been cleared. And you could stand back and you could still see mines scattered throughout. Now, the belief was they were, dead or expended or whatnot, but it's a different world.
It's a different world.
Yeah.
Were you glad to get back to?
I think everybody wants a cheeseburger at some point. I really enjoyed that deployment. It was a lot of fun. I say a lot of fun. For that time in your life, it was just a great experience. Iraq kicked off right before we came back, and the pulse of the community was obviously very different about Iraq than Afghanistan, and I think that tempered a little bit of the ticker tape parades when you come back, and we remember what was going on back in '03, and there was a lot of question about whether they should have gone in or not gone in, and I did not go to Iraq. I was able to get back into school soon after that, yeah, I was glad to get home. Glad to get back to the family. Body wasn't holding up the way it once did. That's probably the toughest part of it.
But you decided to go into law rather than biology.
Yeah, and, I was working. When I was at Lee, I was working at Bradley Memorial in the vascular lab, and of course just trying to continue down that path. I'd kicked around the idea of doing PA school instead of, medical school, getting a few more years on me. I'm not, I was probably 5 years behind the average student in that bracket, which seemed like a lot more than what it really was at that time. And I went on a missions trip with Lee, and we had this little issue we were dealing with down there on this mission trip, and one of the girls came up. I helped kind of mediate, allowing them to do what it is they were asking, because the missionaries did not want them to do this as part of their cross-country team or something, and so I said, all right, well, look, I'll go run with them, and we were able to work this issue out. And one of the girls came back to me afterwards and said, you ought to be an attorney. You did that so well. You just were able to represent us in a way that really made the difference, and you ought to be an attorney. And it's that little, insignificant seed that gets planted. That I said, I came back and kind of looked up, all right, well, what do you have to do to become an attorney? Do I need to take new classes?
How do you spell it?
There you go. And so it worked out well. And so kind of started down that road, probably my senior year at Lee, and then went off to law school.
Have you been at Logan and Thompson ever since, or did you?
I came home, took the bar, hung a shingle out for 6 months, and then Robert called me and said, hey, I want you to come in and try a couple of projects for me. And that would have been January 1 of 2010, and been there ever since.
It probably helps being in an office with other law attorneys, right? A lot of.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, to start your own practice, and of course, coming from a field where my dad was a doctor, and I'm kind of moving over to this dark side, as it were.
Yeah.
I didn't know a lot of attorneys. Mike Calloway was somebody that I knew well. Of course, he did the med-mal defense and one or two others, but that was it. And so it was tough to get business. I mean, that first year I made nothing. And
when you say nothing, you mean nothing hard.
Nothing. I mean, I'd owned a house in law school, so I was able to sell that, and I'm basically living off the profits from that. I was sleeping in the back bedroom, running the office out of the front side of my house, and living in the back and trying to keep this image. It was a very, very challenging time. And then so you go over to, but to your point, I mean, what would take me a lengthy period of time to file a draft a certain motion, because I've never even done one before. Now, once I've gotten into Logan Thompson, well, we got a bank. I mean, here's what it is. You have somebody to mentor you and to guide you, and so that has taken my career much further than it would ever be on my own, because I'm able to get involved in cases that I would never have been able to, experience on my own. Being able to work second chair on a case or a trial, whether you're representing some local government or some multi-million-dollar business or however that case may play out, you get to work on projects that build your skill set without having to burn, hundreds of hours just learning, okay, what is emotion?
Yeah.
Which is, something that, some lawyers don't even know as they begin, and I didn't know. It's a struggle.
Well, before you came in, I was scanning something on my computer, and my scanner doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if I was in the office with multiple people, somebody in there would have a scanner.
Right.
I mean, it's not very significant, but it is to me. It's Sunday, and I don't have a scanner.
Yeah.
So now I got to drive it to that place tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, you don't think how much of a difference it does make to have people around you that are good, that are solid, that are trustworthy, that are experienced. But it absolutely does. And so being there at Logan Thompson, having I started doing everything. I basically worked as a poor paralegal in a corner with a law license, doing everything from, putting postage on my own envelopes and drafting my own papers and all of that, to having the hearings. And then, over time, you're able to justify staff support. And once you're able to get staff support under you, good staff support, it makes a world of difference, because now all of a sudden I dictate a letter, I'm done in 30 seconds, and the next 15 minutes it takes to get that letter out the door, the typing and the postage and the scanning and all of those things is done by somebody else. And so you're able to handle a larger number of cases and more complex cases.
On the courthouse square at 30 2nd Street is the law firm of Logan Thompson Law. Since 1965, they have served the legal needs for the good citizens of Cleveland-Bradley County. If you've got a problem, they're no problem. Give them a call. What type of law do you kind of specify now to a certain type of law?
I focus my practice primarily on insurance claims, civil litigation. And the nice thing about the office, you go back to it, is each of us are able to deal with particular areas of the law. So I really don't do any criminal defense. We've got 3 attorneys there handling those. I don't do much domestic work. I'm able to slide off those referrals to Phil or someone else in the office. And so I primarily deal with insurance claims. And that's a broad term to say, if you've been to the hospital, you're probably going to meet with me at some point, because a lot of that ends up being an insurance type of claim. So Social Security disability is a part of my practice, and there is an insurance element to that in a certain way. Workers' compensation, products liability, personal injury type of cases, medical malpractice, healthcare liability. And so it wasn't something when Robert brought me in that we sat down and said, here's going to be the path that you're going to travel.
Yeah.
I guess we'd love to have that much organization and forethought into the future, but really we've got work that we need to have done, and you're going to naturally progress in one area or another based on what your skill sets are.
Do you think you have a knack for that?
I think I do, primarily because of my upbringing. And so, again, growing up on the missions field with Dad and being in the operating room, with the military, a large part of what I had done was some medical work. And so I was a nationally registered paramedic and had some advanced skills above that. I took anatomy, physiology. I had the biology courses. When I read a medical report, I basically understand the majority of what's going on. And I'm able to digest it a little easier than you might, okay, as a layperson.
I know. Have you ever heard of the theory that skill stacks? In other words, a person might not be extremely skilled in this one area, but he's somewhat skilled in this and this and this and this, and that makes him skilled in that. And that's sort of what you're saying. You had a military background, your dad was a doctor, you knew the vocabulary, you're EMT, and so these things are something that you were trained for.
Yeah, and I think you kind of, you look at that and you say, oh, what am I going to be good at in my practice?
Yeah.
You know, at one point I thought, well, maybe I'll do criminal defense work. You know, I grew up here in town. I know a lot of people, a lot of alumni I went to school with, church, etc. I'm not getting a lot of criminal defense calls. Okay, those tend to be in other areas, and so you know, where's a good spot for me? And it was always dealing with medical records and healthcare. And you know, I guess there's a compassion element. There's back to our not being very emotional side of the house. I feel inside that I've got a great deal of compassion for people going through those situations, and so that's, you know, I've always thought, how can I be like my dad? When I see the work that my dad has done overseas with his missions, even continuing to today, he does that out of a spirit of compassion, out of help. And a lot of people don't see lawyers as being in that same arena. And how can I go to Honduras today and provide some service to these people and give back? And it's tough to do as an attorney. So I look for that every day in my practice, is how can I be compassionate? How can I help somebody that's really dealing with a tough situation? Most of the people that have to be patient, because most of the people that come in and meet with us are dealing with the most difficult situation they've ever dealt with in their life. They're afraid. And that's tough. So you got to be understanding on that.
You know, that seems to be something that we go along and we end up doing, we hope we end up doing what we're good at. And so that seems to be what led you to, did somebody in the office say, hey, you'll be good at this?
No, I just think it was a flow. And so when Robert had me started in there, and I did work with, for the first couple of years, I spent a lot of time working under Robert. And then I would spend a lot of time working under Mr. Logan. And then Rob Norrid was in the office. And so each of them would give me, you know, significant tasks at varying times in there. And so what, you got to touch on various areas. But what it kept coming back to was something that I was able to do quicker, more efficient, with a better result than anything else, became dealing with healthcare issues. I say that broadly, medical records, understanding that, and not needing to send off records as often to third parties to give us feedback. And so that, I think it was just, all right, this is where he's leading, this is where his revenue's coming from, this is where he seems to be doing the best, and so let's just continue to foster that area.
How do you keep up with all the multiple cases? It seems like that would be maddening.
Support staff. You mean from what's coming down as far as new law, or just within the office? I
mean, just within the cases. I'm sure you got more than 10 cases, right?
I've probably
in
got...
some...
Yeah. There's probably between 100 and 150 cases that I'll have primary responsibility for at any given time. Somewhere in that ballpark.
So at any... And that's probably not unusual for an attorney, right? And
it depends on the office and depends on the type of practice. Okay, some practices are a lot more time intensive and you would take on fewer clients. I would not want to have 100 clients in a domestic practice. That would be very, very difficult, because that's primarily kind of an hourly fee thing, and you're really struggling with how much time can I focus on this client versus this client. With
people more irate probably in domestic stuff.
It is. So for me, it's really relying on my support staff. And so I've got four paralegals that are working for me now. We just hired another one a couple of weeks ago, and she's doing wonderful. One of them focuses exclusively in the disability realm, and that's all she does, and does a great job on it. So that takes out a lot of the day-to-day issues with those clients. client may call and say, well, I got a letter, I'm supposed to be at this examination, okay, and she's able to handle that independently. And then I've got the other 3 paralegals that deal with the other array of cases. And I meet with every one of my clients on the outset, and I dictate a very detailed, lengthy memo after that meeting that talks about everything from why did they come in the office, who sent them into the office, if there's a unique aspect to that person's character, all of those things that really stood out for me, along with the facts and the direction of the case and all of that. So that initial interview memo for me is something that I rely on all the time. And so, Robin or Leslie might come in and say, hey, let's talk about, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith is this one, 2 words, all right, got him. Let's go. Much like your construction business, you've got a lot of cases going on and, 1 or 2 facts, and you're like, I got you. What's the issue in that case? And, and you're able to do that. So organization is huge, and in the support staff arena, when you're hiring somebody, that is probably the number 1 thing you're looking for, is somebody that can pick up that organization, can be that self-starter, and to keep me going in the direction I need to be going in, and to get that paperwork in front of me, because when I dictate on something, I'm expecting that staff to pick it up and abide by those dictations and get that back to me when I've said at the bottom, get this back to me in 2 weeks. But the only way you can manage that number of
2
cases.
weeks, 14 days?
Well,
13?
yeah, just as a hypothetical, when that might be. Yeah.
You make a note, they're going to get back to me in that?
Do I test them?
No, I mean, do you have a mental note?
Generally, it may not be a timeline, but it'll be, okay, for instance, with the initial interview, you might get down there and say, all right, this is a case she's about done with her treatment. Her next appointment date is on this day. Please give her a call at the end of that. Make sure she doesn't have any other evaluations coming up. If so, go ahead and get the records and get those back to me at that point. And so it's on them to follow through that chain.
You don't seem like the kind of guy that would stand for, I'm sorry, I forgot.
We all make mistakes, and I make them probably as much as anybody else. There were several years in my career where I didn't have any support staff, or the support staff I had, we were just getting overwhelmed. And you're staying up late at night, waking up at 3 a.m. thinking about, Miss Jones or Mr. Smith, and that's a tough time. You're going to end up making a mistake.
It's terrible.
And that was a several year period of time. That was a very dark season for me, in trying to digest how do I get past this, because I cannot continue to practice law that way.
Was it
or
a
to
2-year
live.
period or a 5-year period?
It was probably 3-4 years. Again, you're looking back over 12, 13-year career here in town, and it's hard to, probably 3-4 years. And I picked up one of the paralegals that I've got with me now, and then a couple others, and as we move through that, you're able to now work ahead of schedule. You're not waiting on the deadline to come through. You realize if this marker doesn't happen or that marker doesn't happen, we're just going to go forward. And so it's a much better place. And if my staff came in and said, hey, Matt, look, we goofed up. We thought the statute was this day instead of this day. All right, no big deal. That's still 2 months down the road.
Yeah, we're
we
ahead.
Got plenty
We're
of
ahead.
time.
We're offensive here.
Right, and that's a good place to be. That's a good formula, good chemistry to be in the office, and it's brought a lot of peace in my life and in my family's life as well.
I always think of it as we stay ahead so we can get behind, and then it doesn't hurt as bad. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That period, was it like you were staying up real late and getting up real early?
Yeah, when I started, I am not the brightest guy. I'd be the first to admit that. But I consider myself to be a hard worker, and so when I started there at Logan Thompson, I'd get in at 6:30 in the morning. I'd leave at 6:30. I always felt like I needed to be there before the senior partners, and I needed to not leave until after the senior partners had gone home. And so I'd work just countless hours, and then I'd come in on Saturdays and
Sundays?
no, I would generally take work home, but at that time I was living down on Worth Street. I was 4 blocks from the office. I
Yeah.
never had to drive. And so, working on a Saturday was really just walking down the street, popping in, getting it done. And so, I still take files home every weekend, and I'm able to deal with them. I was at my son's soccer match on Saturday, and I had some documents a client wanted me to review in their case, and so I was able to flip through them there during that free
At the
time.
soccer match?
Over at Lee. Lee does a great little kids soccer
Yeah.
program.
Okay.
Good coaches over there.
So you were thumbing through the stuff then?
Just whenever I get a free moment. And I mean, the more I can get done on the weekend, the easier my weeks are. And randomly looking, especially at this season of my life, with all of my free time is also going towards this campaign. I need to lighten up my day, and so I'll take home and hit to the house and knock out a couple of demand letters or a couple of claims, do some analysis in there and spend 2 hours, and that.
Can you do it at home and download it on the computer, and then your office staff can upload it? Or how do you do that?
Well, we, at least with my team, we're almost entirely paper free. And so we've got a VPN access where I'm able to take my Surface Pro and work from home. I can plug into the network.
Yeah.
I can pull all my files up there. Everything that's in my files should be digitized or scanned and available for me, from videos and pictures, medical records, whatever we need. And so I will use that tool, whether I'm on vacation or at the house, to be able to gain access to that information. And then I tend to use just a dictaphone more than anything to be able to develop the document that I need, or whatever we're putting together. Or it may just be, hey Leslie, here's what we need to do on this project, and just do a little memo to her. When I get back to the office the next day, I take my little dictaphone and just sync it into a cradle, and that goes to the staff, and they're able to do that. Technology's been
It's hard to work
awesome.
it's hard for me to work at home because I can get so much done if I'm sitting at, I don't know, it's the height of the table or the chair. It's like it's hard to do it at home unless you're just reading something.
To me, it's the distractions at home that more than anything. Of course, I'm at a point where I've got a 4-year-old and 8-year-old there with me, and you're wanting that time. So it's the competing time. So when am I going to be able to pop this up and get focused on it? Because I'm not writing much or drawing much, the height of the chair is not that big of a deal. But it is what's going on around me.
But don't you find that at home it's just hard to get in the zone?
Absolutely.
Because you got to be in the zone.
You got to plan for it. You got to say, this is the way I'm going to do it.
This 2 hours, not 30 minutes, not 20, but 2 hours here, I'm going to get in the zone, and I'm going to really get creative here, and I'm going to be thinking. And
COVID was a great example of this, when some of our staff would rotate through working from home, and one of my staff would get up at the same time they always do. They would literally leave the house, drive to the coffee shop, pick up a cup of coffee, come back to the house, and that's when they started their workday.
to set their mind.
To get their mind straight.
That's a good idea.
And that routine is what helped them so much. All right, that's a great idea.
That's a genius idea. They say kids that grow up in more of a routine are better off.
I hope so, because we're trying that in our house.
Do you like to stay in? Does a routine help you?
It does, and I think humans naturally are natural characters of some pattern, of some routine in there, whether it be how you drive to work, what path you go to drive to work every day. to the time you get up and go to bed every night. I mean, we're just creatures of routine. To me, it helps me greatly. I think it's been good for the kids. My two children are opposites, and it's funny. And my older one is a very compassionate, soft-hearted young man, and very caring. And if he feels like your emotions have been hurt, he can tell that, and he'll come up and he'll hug you and say, "Mom, I really appreciate this," or whatever the case may be. But that routine has been great for him. Mm-hmm. Now the younger one, 4 years later, he's going to be a leader of men. Whether those be good men or bad men, time will tell. But he's much stronger in it, and the routine has been tougher to keep with him. We've had to learn a different way we have to raise him differently than we do the older child. And that's been a challenge for us as parents. So the routine, I think that's helped him.
If you raise kids all the same, you're in trouble.
There's no doubt.
Because people aren't the same.
No, and we look at, we've got triplets. My parents adopted triplets from Honduras back in it's probably 88, 89, that time window. And they were 3 years old when they came to the United States, but they were triplets, biological triplets, not identical. And it was two girls and a boy. And they were raised, as far as one can tell, mm-hmm. in the it was all in the same home, given the same opportunities, mm-hmm. given the same chances in life. They were all, intelligent children, and they turned out to be completely different. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To a certain degree. And it was just amazing to watch him. So I think when you raise, children the same, it's going to be tough.
It makes you wonder if it's anything we do that makes a difference.
You're going to go down that nature versus nurture conversation, but I do believe that when you see, I think that children respond to different stimuli differently, depending on what their natural makeup is. And so for Anthony, when he feels that somebody has been hurt, all I really need to do is pull him off to the side and say, "Anthony, that was just not a nice way to go about it." And, that's all it takes for him. But Sammy needs a little bit more of the spoon. And I keep a wooden spoon in there, but he needs a little bit more force, because he does, he's just not as soft in his compassion at that age. And so I'm trying to be as gentle as I can. 40 years from now, he'll be watching this. But no, it's tough. And if I went to my parents and asked how Josh and I were different, it'd be interesting.
Or if you ask them today how you're different, we don't take advice today from them.
No, we try. But you always think that you're smarter than you are, and you don't need other advice. But my dad has got great wisdom, and sometimes I just need to be more patient when he's trying to explain something to me. And I'm like, I know it. Stop, Matt. Listen to him. He's got years more than me.
Maybe you're more like your youngest son than you realize.
Probably. Probably.
What's it like working with Jimmy Logan? He's one of my best friends.
He is. He's been a mentor throughout this. The wealth of knowledge that guy has is unbelievable. And of course, his life is law. His life is that office. I did not know him when I started in the practice, and of course, getting to know him over the past 12 years has been fun. Politically, we're very different, at least in some social political areas. I'm a staunch conservative, and he's a very outspoken Democrat, and we've had a lot of debates, heated debates on issues. And I think
he's okay with that, isn't he?
He loves it.
He loves
to push your envelope,
mm-hmm.
and what you think is the natural dialogue. If you're raised this way, I remember him sitting down and talking to my mom. I walked by like, oh Lord, how is this going to go? Mom, was very, very heavy in New Hope and pro-life, and so to have these two kind of banter, and Mom's just yes, sir, I understand. He loves to challenge the way you think about a particular issue, and that's a tough thing for people to accept. And he'll argue both sides of any point that you present to him. And so sometimes I don't know, Jimmy, is that really what you believe, or are you just pushing my envelope?
I've found that if I think I'm out thinking him, I'm wrong. He's too far ahead of me.
Yeah. He loves to debate, but I've also kind of walked through that and seen a lot of similarities in Jim Logan to, many of the men that have been very instrumental in my life, the conservative men who've been instrumental. My dad, I mean, he's a man that truly cares for his family. He truly cares for this community.
Very compassionate.
Very, very compassionate. Will take the shirt off his back and give it to just about any client that comes in there. And those characteristics are just lost so frequently in this day and age. And so to have somebody as great as Jimmy, I hope that he is, here making debates with me for the next 30 years if we can.
If he's here,
great.
he'll be doing that.
Yeah, there's no doubt. He'll be up in that office just plugging away.
Back to the seasons of life. I was eating with a good friend of mine. He's an older gentleman. One time something was really bothering me, and I asked him. Instead of giving me the answer, he said, yeah, that's one of the phases. I was looking for a magic bullet, and not only was there no magic bullet, but there was more phases to come.
Yeah. And where's the end on that?
And should we really just enjoy the phase we're in and not take it so serious?
Well, one of the things in Psych 200, you're over there with Paul Kahn and his son-in-law teaching.
Jerome?
Yeah. And you've got the 20s, you got your teenage years and what you're doing there, and your 20s and your 30s to 50s, and then you start to creep up into that, that 60s time frame, the late 50s, 60s, 70s, where you're now looking back on life and you're realizing, that you're now in these other years, and you're thinking, all right, well, how am I holding on, and where do I evaluate various things in my own life? And so, you've got to stop and cherish the things that are most important to you. For me, family, faith, my children, giving them what I can, my parents. We're a very tight-knit family. And so no matter how hard you want to work to make that almighty dollar, to be able to get that next vacation or however it is, vacation is not worth anything if you don't have the people around you to enjoy it with.
You ever watch the movie Into the Wild?
I don't know if I have.
Where he headed out to Alaska, and he finally got there, and he was living in a bus, and he died in the bus by himself.
Really? Yeah.
And the final scene of the movie, as he was dying, he wrote in the book, let's see, what was it? Happiness only exists when shared.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it didn't matter. You have to share it, or it's not happiness.
Absolutely
Happiness
right.
only exists when shared.
I think
was
that's
his
fair.
last. And that was actually what happened. It was a documentary of the guy. They found his book.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's right. And so we get ground up in our day-to-day life, and you've just got to take a time to step away, which is why I'm loving the technology the way I am. And COVID was so challenging for all of us. Mm-hmm. But I think during that time, a lot of people, myself included, probably took more vacations during that 2020 window than others, if you call them vacations. Mm-hmm. But when you're working from home, all right, well, if my world is able to be accessed remotely, I can work here, I can work at the beach. we did a RV vacation. It's my first RV vacation. I've always wanted to do it as a young child. And so we rented an RV from here in town and drove all the way to Denver thinking, all right, this won't be bad.
Yeah.
You know, the haul. And we just packed up the kids and did this for about a week. And it was probably the best vacation I've ever been on my entire life. And the kids would say the same thing. Because every day was just an adventure, and all you're doing is just enjoying that time together. With the car, you're like, we're going to stop in Kansas and go to, you know, the Wizard of Oz city over there. And,
isn't it funny, you can go out of town for a week and the only thing you remember years later is the flat tire you had when you was on the trip?
Yeah. But you're laughing at it the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
It's those memories that, what do you say? That I've got a little plaque up at the cabin that says we count time in memories, not moments, or something of that nature. Those memories are what matter.
Now, with the things being so busy and things going good with you now, you're actually adding something else to the mix. Now you're running for public office, which is probably something, I'm going to guess, you never dreamed of.
You know, people have kind of come to me and said, hey, you ought to consider this, you ought to consider that, and you know, you've got that little bit of a resume with the military and the conservative in this community, et cetera, et cetera. You've got those stacks that can kind of get you there, but I'm just very, very happy, and I don't want to change directions in my career. So Robert had come to me a couple of weeks before the deadline to submit your applications and said, you know, I was considering doing this, but my children are essentially about to graduate and don't have that vested role. And he's like, you know, you ought to consider it. So I sat down with my wife and we prayed and we talked about it. I spoke to my family, some members from my church, and I thought, you know, do I really need this on my plate? But then it came back to seeing the children, to seeing the school system. I'm so vested in this community. This is my home. I've lived on almost every continent at some point in my life. All of the bases, the law school, everything. Cleveland has always been my home. I've never changed my tax record or my voting record as far as I know. It's always been here, and this is always the place that I intended to come back to. So I want to see this community succeed and continue to grow. I would love for my children to have the same a better educational experience than I did. We go back to me being, you know, kind of a slacker back then. But, you know, I want to give them that. And so this really kind of came home to me. I think the book I read tells me that I shouldn't be casting stones from the cheap seats, but rather, if you can help your community, get involved. Get off the fence, put your name in, and try to make a difference in a particular area. And so that's what happened here. I thought, let's get some new blood on the board. I've got about 6-8 years till my children get up there into the middle school, high school program, and I'd like to try to help.
Somebody's got to do it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, somebody's got to do it.
I think so. I mean, I think that fresh ideas are vital to any business, and that energy that comes along with it. And I'm certain, I know when I've hired new people, and I'm sure when you've hired new people, they come in and they're happy to be in that job, and they say, well, listen, have you thought about doing it this way? And they thought about it. Some of the ideas are good, some of them are bad.
Hello, I'm Dee Burris. I want to inform you of a special election coverage we're going to have on The Discussion on May the 3rd at 6:30. I will have members of the Liars Table joining me as we watch the election unfold. Please join us Tuesday, May the 3rd on Facebook or YouTube Live. In The Discussion, it's no problem. The guy that has the experience will tell you how it can't be done. And the guy that has no experience will tell you how it might can be done.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to have. I mean, if we didn't have fresh thoughts.
Yeah, and a good lawyer is one that doesn't have all the answers, but knows how to get those answers, but is willing to open his mind or her mind up to new ideas and fresh ideas. And I think that's really what some of this campaign is about, is trying to look towards the future and trying to, raise the level with the local school system. A lot of debate might go back and forth about how well the school system is doing today. There are things that are in the news that would say that they're not great. There are things in the news that says that they're doing wonderful. But regardless of what metrics you use to evaluate our city school system, to me the question is, can it get better? Can we be in the top 25 in the state of Tennessee? We have the brains in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. We have the financial resources in Cleveland. We've got the mechanisms here to be able to put us into a top-tier school. We just, if I come in and I'm energetic to try to create those new ideas, let's do that. This has been eye-opening, because once I put the name in, some people started communicating with me that weren't doing it before. My wife's on the PTO, so she hears a little bit more on a day-to-day basis. But you begin to hear from parents that don't feel like their voice has been heard in particular issues. Or you hear from teachers that feel that they're not being represented well. And it's not a global, emotion or feeling, but it's something that we ought to try to work better at. I tell my staff in the office every day, if you come up with a way for us to do this better, you come in and talk to me. If I'm dictating and you can't hear me and you start hearing all this stuff and it's making your job more difficult,
that would be difficult.
You need to come let me know, because I am open to change in almost every aspect of my life.
Yeah.
But I need to hear your insights. I need to hear your input, because you guys are the ones, in the trenches getting it done. And we need to develop those ideas. English as a second language, it's an obstacle for our school system today, especially probably more so in the city schools than in the county schools, just because of the geographical dynamic here. Are we doing enough? Maybe. I think we're doing great things. Is there more that we can do? Is there other ways that we can try to help these students? Because I could tell you from personal experience, just because you speak a different language does not affect your intelligence in one way.
No.
I laughed with somebody this week. My dad speaks Spanish, passable Spanish. Mm-hmm. He's a very, very intelligent man. Mm-hmm. But I guarantee you, when he's over there talking Spanish in Honduras, at first blush, you're like, all right, who's this guy about to cut on me? It's there. But he's a bright guy, and so you just have to find a way to achieve that or overcome that barrier with those students. Can we get more community involvement in that educational process? More tutoring programs that may be free. You may have churches or others that would get involved and do that. Mentorship programs. I've been involved in job shadowing and mentoring for all three of the high schools over the past 8 years. And those students are absolutely unbelievable. The first one I ever did was a young woman who came from a very difficult, challenging place in her own world, and that was more than 8 years ago. And so I watched her finish school, and I watched her go to college and graduate, with honors in college, and now working up in that area of Nashville and just doing an unbelievable job. And it makes me proud to have one little part of that person's life, and for them still to communicate with me about what's going on in their day.
What about the school hours? It seems like that they should, to me, and I've never not heard anybody say this or mentioned it to anybody, but it seems like the work day should mirror more of the school day should work more of the mirror the work day, because people that have to pick their kids up and take their kids and find babysitters. And if you're I think you can go to these places after school and they can keep an eye on you till the end of the work day, but that's almost a penalty in a way, because the school let out, but you got to go to this other school, and these people that's parents don't have to work can pick you up, and you can go to the ballpark. I mean, why not have it be at the same time?
You know, I think that's a compound question, as we might say.
I'm sure there's a reason.
So much, you know, and when you look at, I think that discussion is different at the elementary school versus the junior high versus the high school. Obviously, when you get to the high school level, the students are more mature. We hope that they're more mature.
But
they might be able to drive. They might be able to get themselves home. You also have athletics in many instances, and so for a lot, if you're doing an athletic program at the end of the day, you're getting out of school 2:30, 3 o'clock. You'll go have a 2-hour practice with your sports, and then at 5 o'clock you're let out. Your parents can pick you up on the way home from work, and so there's a little bit of that in that.
But why not have like a 4-day school week that matches the work time, and have one day off, and where you don't have to worry about taking your kids, like say.
What happens on that day off if the teacher or if the parent then has to work a 5-day work week?
That's a good point. That's a good point. Then who watches them?
Yeah.
Well, who watches them in the summer?
Like when you start getting into 2-income households, single parents that are, the breadwinners in the family, you begin to sit back and say, okay, I was so blessed because they work so hard, and to change one little thing in their world, to come in and say, okay, we're going to start 2 hours late today because of cold weather last night.
It's devastating for them.
It is devastating. Their job is on the line. Their job's on the line. They're not able to take that next step. And there's so many people in our community we forget about that are clawing tooth and nail to make it day in and day out. And those little ripples, it's all it takes to get them off that ledge.
I think that is what I was saying with the work week. Do you know how many, we talk about our week being hard, and I've got this and you've got that, but there's people that are sitting home saying, now, on Tuesday he's got this, and I got to pick them up, and Thursday I got this, and I got to pick them, and I got to go to the grocery store. Man, it's you talk about pressure.
Well, and back to this 4-day versus a 5-day school week, it is scary how many families in this community, or how many children in this community, rely upon the meals that they get at school to feed them, not only during the week, but on the weekend.
And in the summers, it doesn't.
You've got these snack crack programs, and these other, and great community leaders have supported this. It is not an easy decision to make under any scenario, and so this is not something. I'm a small government kind of guy. Okay, I think that a decision one would hope a decision affecting Bradley County and Cleveland can be better made and addressed by the people in Cleveland and Bradley, versus a global decision being made at the state level, or a global decision being made at the federal level. And so, you just continue to trickle that down to the elementary schools, and how is there a way to develop a program that differentiates those well, then you got buses, and then you've got the routes and the pickup schedules and the drop-offs.
We can't think of everything it affects.
It's unbelievable. And of course you've got the teachers, and the teachers are also dealing with their own children. Many of our teachers are young and have their own children in the system. And so it is not something that anybody should take lightly, or just jump in and say, this is the magic pill that's going to solve it all, because it's not there. I think that dealing with it with understanding, with a listening ear, and a great deal of compassion.
And maybe what helps the majority.
Yeah, but who's the majority? Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, the majority is fine, but who are you leaving out by that? And the majority may be the higher on our socioeconomic class.
That's
well,
right.
then you're leaving out the more needy, the it may be the lower on our socioeconomic class, and then you're losing the higher group.
And it's my guess that the lower end's working too hard, and they don't even have the time to call and complain. They're just trying to survive today.
That's exactly it. I think that there's no doubt that those families, those single moms, single dads, the the two-income households, they're just trying to make it. And
There's not a tougher person in the world than a single mother.
absolutely, absolutely. And so, how can we facilitate their input at a school board meeting? How do we allow the parents to feel like they're heard without 6 o'clock or 5:30 on a Monday night? You've got this window, very small room, and you come in here and voice that concern. Well, look, somebody said the other, our school board meeting is streaming, and so you can watch it. Well, yeah, but the school board meeting is not only for the board to
Yeah.
project information out to the community. It is for them to receive feedback
What good is
from
that?
the
We're
community.
not running a corporation here.
So how can we better involve parents? How can we better involve teachers into the decision-making process? How can we try to keep some decisions that might be made at the state level and help them? I was dealing with some special needs families last week who were telling me, how things have shifted over the past couple of years in the management of a lot of the special needs students, and like, all right, well, that just didn't make sense, and that may have been a state decision to say, we're going to disperse this body of people that does need extra resources. We're going to disperse them among all the schools. Well, okay, but does that really help that child? And then it depends on the child. Okay, you've got children that have more needs, but those that are more adapted, and so there's a test there.
It's going back to raising kids. You can't treat them all the same.
You can't.
You can't raise them the same.
You can't. And this particular person was telling me, it's as simple as the drop-off line at school. My child takes several minutes for me to get my child out of the car and into the system. Okay, and so it's the school where we go. It's it's a machine. And you pull up, they've got people out there to open the door. The kid hops out, he goes in. I'm there for 10 seconds at best, long enough for my child to jump out and go. If the horns start honking, if it takes you more than 30 seconds to get your kid out of the car, or if your kid's got a basket of fruit he's supposed to take in. All of a sudden, it's a dynamic. Can you block that off 5 minutes?
5 minutes
for him, because his child had special needs that they dealt with, and so it's.
Oh Lord, I can't imagine.
And so
Can
it's
you
like,
imagine that?
Yeah, and you just.
I'm just now
it's like,
getting
all right,
what you're saying. That's horrible.
Right, and so he's, you're trying to, all right, how do I adapt to this? How do I figure this out? And that's not just happening at one school now, because the shift of that.
And you don't want to have a separate entrance from them. That'd be horrible.
So you've got those areas of consideration, and that may have been a state decision instead of a local decision. But personally, I guess it depends on which parent you're talking to. Does your child have more needs than others? But I tend to like the idea where your teachers that are best prepared to deal with particular issues, that are trained to deal with particular issues, where your resources are available. We went through and had rooms. My Rotary Club helped sponsor a room in one of the schools for children with autistic issues, and so we don't have that in every particular elementary school. But that's such a help for many students. Can we have those resources available to the students? I think that's probably helpful. Flip side of that coin is, you've kind of moved a body of people into one particular group, and do they feel segregated by that?
Right.
And so there's no
You don't want to feel.
perfect answer.
You don't want a child to feel segregated. Do
No,
you?
no, but we want these children to succeed, every one of them, and success is graded on various scales for every particular student. But I think we have a duty, a responsibility to do the best we can for not the whole, but for each individual student throughout that process as an individual student. And I think that's the debate we've gotten into recently in, at the federal and the state level and with education of, do you have a school that you take a Chicago, you take some of these communities where their academic, generally speaking, have been considered very, very low because there's very little parental involvement. You have people coming from very difficult homes. Mm-hmm. Academically, they're struggling, and the teachers, one, are just trying to keep crime out of the classroom, but also they may be struggling with teaching to that lowest denominator. Okay, well, is that the right way to go? But now my son is very, very bright, and so we want, when he's in class and he finishes his test early, we'd like the teacher to give him more work and keep him, moving forward. And so where's the balance in that? There is no right answer, I don't think, but we need to determine what the community...
And maybe we could look at other communities, how they've handled it. Maybe there's some answers there.
Yeah. I think it's tough.
Did you have any teachers in school that... I had a couple of teachers that absolutely made the year horrible. Did you have any of those?
There was one in law school. Very tough. But here...
I mean, when you were going to... Where did you go? Where would you go?
In elementary school, I started at E.L. Ross when my parents lived across from the old international headquarters.
Yeah, how old are you, by the way?
I'm 44.
I went to E.L. Ross. I was there the first year it was open.
Okay, so I would have gotten there probably 83, 84, and went there for 2 years, first and second grade. I had a teacher in my second grade tell me, you're going to be a doctor like your dad, aren't you? And I'm like, why? Because your handwriting's awful. And I thought, that just kind of sticks with me. And I always laugh at it. It was humorous, and she was a wonderful, wonderful teacher.
Didn't mean nothing by it.
No. But it was one of those keys. And so I try to work on my handwriting and that. And then I went to North Lee.
That was a good school.
It was absolutely great.
Best school.
I remember my third grade teacher during the transition was Miss Elkins, and just absolutely caring person. And so I moved through the North Lee program. Some teachers you like more than others, but nobody made it horrible. Everyone was just loved what they did. And then went to Cleveland Junior High at that time.
Yeah.
And what is now it's all the high school now.
Yeah, I don't know.
And so went through there 2 years and then went to the high school. And I can't think of one bad experience with any teacher I've ever had there. Now, there were classes I liked better than others. There were classes I did not want to do my homework in, but that was more of an academic issue. I can't think of one teacher that was just,
I've always wondered if the school board should be divided up into the school board for the kindergarten through sixth grade, and then the school board for 7th grade to 12th, because it's just so different.
I think that it is, but I still think that you need a singular body that oversees the administration of the whole system.
Which is what we've got,
Which is what we have. And so, do you then subcommittee this out? Do you then break that down and say, well, I think even in the middle school now, they've got an assistant principal for each grade level. Okay, so that once you've broken it down into the school itself, you've got people to work on those issues. But, I think it would be tough because you do want, I think you do want that stream of transition. You want the education process to naturally flow from beginning to end. You take a wrestling program, for instance, and you say, all right, how did Cleveland become the excellent program it is? How did Bradley, when, of course, I graduated in 95, we won 4 state championships then. That's about the time Bradley picked off and started having their 10-year reign. Yeah. How did they get to that point? They started at the kid club level, and they had a streamlined system of teaching the kids, here are the basics that you're going to also learn when you get to high school. And we're just going to continue to build on this all the way up. And so the high school level coaches knew what the younger ones were teaching, and they would work together so well. And I think that
shoots
evolves.
my theory down.
Well,
Because you're right. What you're saying makes sense.
yeah.
It's a progression.
You know, and I think when the Cleveland program got together, they said, all right, well, if I'm going to come in, I want to be able to have the ability to hire the people I want to at each age level so that they will support and feed this high school program. Because, the middle school program is a stellar program, and the Kid Club program is a great program. But they need to be building on that skill set. You know, back in the 90s, Bradley threw legs in. They wrestled with their legs, and that was kind of the note to the Bradley program. Cleveland didn't do that as much or as well as they did. Well, they didn't just start that in high school. I mean, that was started at a much lower program, and so there's similarities on a much bigger scale with the city and county school systems that, you know, I think that they all need to be communicating. They need to be supporting each other. They need to be feeding those tracks. Step it up to the collegiate level and say that the colleges, I hope, are communicating well with the secondary and high schools as to what they need as building blocks to keep that education moving forward. I suspect that's happening.
I'm curious when they first got school boards, like in our area. I mean that they couldn't have had them back in Rott's time, or there had to be some.
It was appointed for a long time, and
Jerry Frazier was appointed, wasn't he?
I think so, and I think Dawn Robinson, when she started, was appointed, and then at some point thereafter, it transitioned to an elected position, and then this year it has gone to a partisan race as the first year. So you choose between Republican and Democrat, and there is a primary election, and that election is, well, it's now going to be held May 3rd, and basically with the exception of one race, and this is not just in the city school board, it's the county school board, it's the county commission, it's everybody that is coming up on the May 3rd race. With the exception of one race, everything's decided May 3rd.
Because we're
everything's partisan, but we're a Republican community, and it's, you know, generally held that if you want to win a race, you need to run as a Republican. So to a lot of my, you know, Democrat friends, I'm looking at them like, if you want a say in who's running your government, you're going to have to
pick the best.
You're going to have to come over and vote in the Republican primary.
Yeah.
You're going to need to do that, and you hate to discuss it, but if you wait until August, it's done. The decision's already been made for you, and that's a hard pill to swallow. But it's Bradley County, Tennessee.
But I mean, when did the first Cleveland get a board? Like in 1890 or?
Well, the school's been in since what, 70s, 70, 69.
Maybe, yeah, 70. Cleveland High School's probably 70s.
So, I guess we could Google that.
It'd be interesting to know when they formed their own school board.
Mm-hmm. County's been around a lot longer.
Even this county school board.
Yeah.
Schools are so important, aren't they?
They're the building block for our future. Talked last week. If these are, in some years, one of those students is going to be sitting in this room, running your business, meeting with your former business associates. They're going to be in my law office. They're going to be in the mayor's office. They may be
doing eye surgery on us.
They're going to be the doctors, the lawyers. They're going to be the workers down at Vacher.
They may marry our sons and daughters.
Oh, Lord.
So we'd better.
Yeah. But they're our future, and so we've got to give everything we can to get all of them where they need to be, not just the majority. Okay, we need to focus these areas. I talked about my concern for some of my fellow alumni transferring their kids or opting to go to private school, and that's a big temptation for those that can afford it. can you put your kids in an academic path that is going to be great for your kids? I understand that. The problem comes in is having this mixed dynamic in the in the public school system helps one another. It blends it. These other students tend to be very good PTO supporters, have good parent involvement, are able to donate more money to the band event or the football game, or they're able to provide these resources that help balance out so much that's going on in the community. I want my child to be around peers, other students that he can look up to, that are going home and studying at night because their parents are going home and having them study at night. Kids that we feel comfortable with, and we need that dynamic. We don't need a school system, and it's not the school system's fault, but where so many of the advantaged children are leaving that system. And we need to incentivize everyone to be in that program, to provide those opportunities.
That should be your campaign slogan. It's not for the school system. That's not for the majority.
It's for the. I think it's for every individual kid. It's a tough. That's probably the most difficult thing out there is to incentivize those that can to stay and invest in this community. I don't know how you do that.
We'll be in trouble if they leave.
I think so. I think that we'll. I think so. I think that I look at North Lee, where my son goes, and it's a great school. And Sarah and I were at the Ram Jam Saturday night, and we're walking around with the families. We had, a PTO fundraiser the next morning. And Sarah and I are like, what makes North Lee special?
It's always been special.
What is it? Is it the?
I don't know.
Is it the zoning? Is it the families? But you've got a great involved PTO. You've got a body of students that come from both needy families and affluent families. It becomes a magnet school of sorts. It's not a magnet school. It's a school where parents will say, I'm going to send my child there, and if they can't get in there, they're going to go to private school. So what dynamic created that? Why is that school that way? I don't know.
That's what we're electing you to figure out.
Well, we can debate it, but I think a big part of it is parents are comfortable with that atmosphere. I think parents know the education that they're going to get.
And it's not a new building.
No, they know the building is.
They still got the furnace in the basement.
A lot of the classes are the same ones that I went to. That gymnasium felt a whole lot bigger when I was in fifth grade there than it is now. But
when I went there, they used to shovel coal in that thing in the basement.
Yeah. It's a good school. So I don't know. It's zoned well. You've got the country club area that provides some zoning.
Most people there that I went to weren't country club people necessarily. I don't know what makes it good.
But it's the only non-Title I school in the community.
Maybe it was set up real good in the beginning. The first person in a place will set a tone that lasts a long time.
That could be. But they've got good leadership. They've got great parental involvement, and incredible parental involvement. And that, I think that just builds confidence. And so it's a slow process, and parents start saying, okay, well, a particular friend of mine here in town could have sent his kid wherever he wanted to send him, and lives in the city limits, zoned for a whole other school, and decided I'm going to send my kid to North Lee. And their kids, both completed North Lee and did very, very well. And you want that desire out of the parent to say, this is the top school. This is the school system that is going to help my child achieve not only academic success, but human success. Being in third world countries, being around people that you get a greater exposure to the world on is not a negative thing. I think it's a helpful thing. It builds compassion. So, we don't want a whole lot of students here that are just Macaulay graduates, because there's some loss to that. You want real people. And so I think I want more involvement in our public schools from all socioeconomic classes. So, but we'll see. We'll see what the community wants.
We'll see what the
on
community.
May 3rd. That's it. And they may say we're happy with what we've got. Okay.
Matt,
We'll see.
I'm glad people like you are out there, buddy.
Enjoyed this. This
too.
is good.